That could be its own podcast right there.
Well, we did watch a movie.
We did. We watched a movie. It's called Incantation.
Came out in 2022. Also known as Zhou. I think that's how we pronounce it. I don't know. I'm not good at Mandarin.
Or Zhou. I don't know. I thought it was a Z. Who knows? I don't know.
ZHO with the little thing over it and the U.
It's a really cool symbol though for it.
I think it's pronounced Zhou.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's like a cool Hanzi.
Yeah. Taiwanese film. It's a found footage folk horror kind of film directed by Kevin Ko. It was also co-written by Kevin Ko and Chang Che-wei. I really like this movie.
Highest grossing Taiwanese film of all time. Of all time. So my guess is Kevin Ko's a popular guy over there.
Kevin Ko fucks.
Yeah. Kevin Ko for sure fucks.
Have you seen this film before? No,
I hadn't. So my friend Alex, his girlfriend Angela is Taiwanese, and so I wonder if they watched this together because he was like, adamant, you have to watch this. You have to watch this. It's so good. It does such an interesting, cool, unique thing. And he was right. It does do a really interesting, unique, cool thing.
If I can hearken this to any other movies, it's like The Ring, or Ringu, kind of meets oh man,
Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, Paranormal Activity. But I was also thinking about this one. I think it's either early 2000s. I think it's the early 2000s Japanese found footage horror movie. It was considered for a long time one of the scariest horror movies ever made, or something like that.
Which one was it?
I can't remember. It's something Mask or something like that. I'll show it to you after we're done recording. I should have remembered to look this up before, but I guess let's just start with viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah, definitely.
For the topic of this film and what I'm about to discuss. So in the Japanese found footage horror movie that I'm talking about, there's a scene where there's essentially a small army of baby fetuses.
Whoa.
Crawling up on this one figure that they're looking through a camcorder on. Because they essentially got themselves fucking cursed.
Okay, yeah, getting cursed. This is very much this one plays within the kind of spiritual horror of East Asian cinema.
Yeah,
it's very much in the canon of curse kind of movies. It's like Chinese ghost curse shit.
Yeah, it falls into that subcategory of just East Asian horror about just the folk religions, essentially.
Yes, for sure.
If you can relate it to, it's or I feel like the native for the American equivalent or the Western equivalent, it's like the ancient and Native American burial ground type stuff. Ancient and Native American spirits. It's this removal from modern society in terms of understanding and concepts and religion and stuff like that. It's almost like this generation, several generations removed religion. It's so
and the movie makes a really impassioned kind of the very opening of the movie is this little monologue about how superstitious we are.
Yeah,
and I love it. It is such a little monologue.
No, it's really
so
I
good.
think this is one of the best openings for a horror movie that I've seen in
I
a
agree.
long time.
I completely agree.
Where it gives you this little speech about human perception and manifestation.
Yeah, and the way in which we make wishes. And the way in which we it was and we were talking about how we had an injury on the Detroit Lions a couple 2 weeks ago, last 2 Sundays ago, and I was watching with my friend Jimmy, and he's like, "Oh no." Is blah blah blah, and I was like, "Don't say that! Don't say that!" You know what I mean? Because I was convinced that if he says how he got hurt, that he'll really be hurt. And it's just I consider myself a cold, calculating, rational person. You know what I mean? But even I have these kind of superstitious kind of mechanisms in my mind.
Humans are just superstitious creatures
totally
to begin with. It's part of how we developed cognizance and our ability to rationalize things. Because sometimes it's just easier for our cognition to rationalize things in the unexplainable versus comprehending or trying to tackle with the explainable.
Right.
It's easier for us sometimes to accept things that are unrealistic versus accepting the truth of the reality that we exist in. That's why we have delusions and fantasies.
Yeah, it's just I think a lot of it has to do with a feeling of needing control.
No, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to silence Jimmy because if I can make Jimmy shut the fuck up, then you know what I mean? This player on the Lions is gonna be fine. And we're gonna have a great season. And we're gonna win a Super Bowl. I want to have control over the universe that I don't have, this cold, uncaring universe that I have zero control over.
I think it's a difficulty of individuals tackling with the fact that they have no control over their lives really. No one truly. I mean, you have a control over your life to an
But
extent,
there's a lot that we will never
have
any
control
control
over. There's just that's just the reality of life.
Yeah, and this movie definitely
it like
plays
taps
with
into that
Yeah.
as
That
as
lack
a
of
fear
control, as a-
essentially, because a lot of these characters are essentially left to their fate almost.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and they're put in impossible situations
Yeah.
too. You know, like where like at one point in time so a little bit of the plot details. It details like a group of people who were working as like internet ghost hunters.
They're like ghost hunter vlogger type people.
They're like Zach and Colby or whatever those guys are that on YouTube they like go to haunted places. And they do that kind of content, but then they actually find something really fucked up.
Right.
And this woman has a young daughter, and she's like basically trying to like manage the curse and taking care of her daughter like all at once, and like she's getting like child protective services like called on her. It's like a whole ordeal. But like at one point she's like literally having to decide between like feeding her daughter or like dealing with the curse.
Right.
Like basically one of the suggestions is that if
we'll starve her.
Yeah,
and that will get the demon out.
Yeah, if you don't feed her for 7 days, then she might
don't feed her any food or water.
Yeah, for 7 days. And she's like, "Is that possible?
Is that safe? Is that what we're doing now?"
Yeah.
I thought the most like, especially in that interaction, it's the daughter. She's like, "Don't worry, we'll get through this together," because she thinks that the mom is also not eating either, that they're both starving together, and you just see the mom leave the room and eat her own dinner by herself, and you're just like, God damn, this is insanely heartbreaking.
The whole movie, honestly, like the parts that work for me about it the most are the parts that operate on like the tragic kind of familial level.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the parts of them dealing with kind of the child protective services. The parts like the daughter is living with at a foster home.
Yeah.
At like the beginning of the movie. So there's like a bunch of elements that have like really grounded, like kind of like just like broken family vibes that are really,
a lot
really
of it is
heavy.
just so sad when you really think of it, because like it also seems like no one really at the foster care facility, like no one really like kind of trusts the mom or whatever.
Well, everyone thinks that she's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the first things they teach you in the movie is that this is a woman who people have decided is crazy.
And when she goes to meet her daughter physically for the first time, she goes for this hug. It's this awkward, kind of sad, like I don't know who this lady is type hug.
Yeah. But the daughters couldn't have found like a better child. Finding good child actors is impossible. It's so difficult, and she is incredible.
So
she's amazing.
The main character is this woman named Lee Ronan, who's played by Tsai Xuanyan. I think that's how I pronounce it. And it revolves around her in the modern day, and
there's multiple flashbacks
and set I think maybe 7 years prior or something like that,
to how she got cursed.
And in the modern day, it's much more heavily involved with her daughter Dodo, who's played by the child actress Huan Xingting,
who's amazing. She's incredible,
fantastic.
Definitely one of the best parts of the movie, honestly.
One of the most like, it still gets me every time is when Dodo takes the camera after like they first move in together, goes out to like the outdoor area of the apartment, and then sits on the
roof basically.
Yeah, essentially, and then jumps off, and then you hear a huge slam or crash sound, and you're kind of like left there for a couple seconds, like the shot lingers before she climbs back up, because it almost makes you think that she just jumped off and died.
Yeah,
which would be insane.
Yeah,
to like pull like.
But the movie like plays with your heartstrings with her a lot, but it's pretty effective creatively because like of the desperation and the kind of like of lack of control that Ronan kind of has.
Yeah,
there's like the most heartbreaking line in the movie, and they play it twice because it's so heartbreaking. She the little girl sees the monsters, right? She sees the demons. She sees like whatever's haunting them, and like everyone else can kind of see the effects of them. But supposedly, it seems like the little girl can like literally see the actual kind of the inhibitors of this chaos around them. And she asks her, because she'd been living in foster care. She asked her, she's like, "Mommy, did you throw me away because you could see the monsters too?"
Yeah.
And she doesn't say, "Did you give me away?" She doesn't say, "You put me somewhere." She says, "Did you throw me away?" And it's really, really heavy.
Man, this is so.
The little girl like thinks that she's been like discarded like garbage.
Yeah, and on another thing that like really got to me was her Ronan told Dodo that if she's ever scared to just like name the 3 things.
Oh, that part's also hits
that like
me.
she like loves in this world, right? Or her favorite things in the world.
Yeah, which are pineapples.
Yeah.
Bunnies. And the dog, right?
Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wah wah.
Yeah. So her last words, like when Dodo is still conscious, like when she's taken to the hospital, and
her last line in the movie basically
is those 3 is the phrase.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what the fuck? Like Dodo
she was really scared at that moment. Yeah. She's in the hospital alone and she's really scared.
Like Dodo is not a malevolent character or a like the possessed child trope or whatever.
No, she's not like
Dodo she's
an
abused victim of the abuse of the monster, but also I think it's meant to be like the neglect of her mother.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's tough to say. You know what I mean? The movie demonstrates that Ronan is not capable of handling the situations, but it doesn't really demonize her for it. Like, there's definitely an admittance at some level that you're like,
maybe she shouldn't have been a mother and stuff like that,
or maybe she shouldn't have gotten her back out of. And it's like, but the causes are supernatural.
Yeah, they're out of her control.
Yeah.
What could she do?
I don't know. It's really crazy. I mean, so let's go through a little bit of what happens in the story. Because
other characters that you really need to pay attention to are Ming, Che Qingming, which is I think he's the doctor or
the foster
care worker.
Yeah,
who's played by Cao Ying Xuan.
And he's personalized in a very interesting way because he has a very intimate relationship with Dodo. When he had her in foster care, she called him
dad, father,
and like he always wanted to be a father, and most of the kids never really treat or think of him that way,
right?
And so it was a very he built like a really intimate bond with her, and he initially like believes that Ronan is crazy, and he even it's revealed is the person who ends up calling Child Protective Services on her. But then they try to escape together. I will say that like there's some parts of the movie that are very rote. Like the movie, I want to give this movie like a 10 out of 10, but I kind of can't because it does so many in the body of the film, like in the core of it is a lot of the same visual and like
I would say not the core of the film. It's more of the core of the film itself is incredibly unique and very interesting. I would say it's the things outside of there, the things that bolster its that give it fat essentially, or like increase its runtime, like all the paranormal activity, found footagey, tropey stuff of like post production or digital editing to screen burn and
the story though
digital distortion, stuff like that.
It is every visual gag you've seen from every found footage horror movie ever. And it's almost all of the same themes and at least visual themes, right? So it's like I can't give this movie like an infinite amount of credit for being like really original because it's like it does a lot of things that other movies are doing and it doesn't do them better. It doesn't maybe as well, but not necessarily better.
It's not an improvement on the genre of the found footage genre necessarily.
No, and to me the found footage genre is unfortunately the base. They've made an incredible story.
Yeah.
To like make it kind of worth it going through the experience of a found footage horror movie again. But the found footage horror movie elements of it are not anything to write home about. They're like all of the same kind of environments and like all of the same kind of like, the camera, like someone turning and then walking really close, really fast to the camera. Just like the same exact.
The whole POV and the POV shots of someone holding the camera, walking around, looking through via that the island. Oh, it's just out of my line of sight. Technically, if you were holding the camera, you'd still be able to see what was down there, but it's almost playing as though they can only see through the camera type stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
If that makes any sense, it's very
there's some like fatal frame shit going on.
Yeah, which one, I love the Fatal Frame games. Those games are fucking awesome.
Mhm.
But Fatal Frame has the advantage where it's like you can only see the ghosts through the camera.
Right.
Whereas in this, it's almost like you can only see through the camera.
Yeah. Like my eyes are broken. I have to use the camera to get around. It does feel that way a little bit. And like in general, like there's just certain parts. Do you remember the part where the three of them are just driving around in the same circle over and over again? Like that's not actually scary. It's like annoying.
I thought that's like kind of one of the things I was like, oh, they just added the bolstering runtime.
Yeah, like that just makes the game kind of like they were like short. There was like, oh, 111 minutes isn't long enough. You know what I mean? Like,
right. I don't know, but I would say most of the problems I have with the film occur in the flashbacks.
Yeah, really? You dislike the flashbacks significantly?
Because that's like a lot of it is like the tropey found footagey stuff that like Blair Witch.
There is definitely Blair Witch vibes, and there's also like some like a little bit of like barbarian vibes.
Yeah,
where it's like because there's a huge portion of the flashbacks are these like tunnels that they walk through.
Right.
And I think barbarian probably came after this.
What's wrong with Deborah Logan or something like that?
Yeah.
Or I can't remember the name. Something wrong with Deborah Logan. And then there's another film. It's another found footage film. Figure enough, because Deborah Logan's also found footage, but this one's set in like a Catholic nunnery or something like that, and it's supposed to be a found footage period piece. I really enjoyed it, but how it ends is these two priests enter a underground catacomb.
Yeah, it's always an underground.
Yeah, it's always an underground catacomb.
Yeah, and like even like movies that I really like.
Yeah,
like As Above, So Below.
Underground catacomb.
Yeah, it's like a lot of underground.
Just
like looking at a rocky wall.
Right. I think it's because like people are like, oh, it's claustrophobic. It's an environment. It's a claustrophobic shooting environment. Visually speaking, it feels even more small, I guess, or more claustrophobic. I keep saying claustrophobic, but that's like the best way I can really describe it. It's the only
thing that really describes it.
And like the dark shadows and the tight corners, and like you can have a turn or a corner that is greater than 90 degrees, so you can have things hiding behind shadows, very very much. But it just feels played out after a while. I don't know how else to explain it. It just feels like no one's really doing anything unique with it necessarily.
So these people are constantly being tortured by the demons into like killing themselves, and the main way they do it over and over and over again is by smashing their own brains in. And that is another thing that I feel like I can't even think of where I've seen it before, but it just didn't feel like an original or terrifying way to watch people die.
What is it?
Constantly the characters just like 20 until they're dead.
27 hours later, or
28
hours later.
Yeah, well, you mean wait, it's what's it called? It's 28 months later, and what's the first one called?
No, it's 28 days.
28 days later.
28 months.
20 months. But there's only the two.
Yeah, there's only two, right?
Yeah.
Some of the zombies, because they get the rage virus or whatever, they just start smashing their heads into things.
Yeah.
Which that's like what I thought immediately. Oh, it's like a zombie infection type thing. It's like they just start smashing their heads.
What's funny, I'm trying to think of what it specifically does it, but I just feel like people smashing their own heads in is just something I feel like I've seen a bunch.
It's kind of overdone a bit.
Yeah. And they came up with some cool suicides. Like I actually thought that so if they all killed themselves in a unique, different way, I think that would actually be more valuable.
What I would argue is
her mom puts a blown flaming hot glass in her mouth. Which is like unique. I was like, okay, that's an original one. I've never seen that before.
Insane.
But that's like where she was when it happened, right? Everyone else who smashes their head in, it seems like there wasn't anything else around you could kill yourself with?
Well, so I thought it was pretty, spoilers, because
there's okay, by the way, this is not a spoiler free review. We are going to talk about the big twist.
We're going to be talking about everything.
Yeah, we're going to talk about everything. And a big portion of the movie is a very fun and unique twist.
With Ming, when he started smashing his head on the desk, I didn't care. When Ronan starts smashing her head at the end,
and Dom did it too.
I could see the table, right? I could see the table that she's smashing her head on, and like essentially the stone kind of bounce a little bit. That felt more interesting visually for me, because I think I'm just so used to characters smashing their head on glass,
but it's still at least 3 characters that do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Which is like 3 deaths. Like, here's the thing too. Like, I don't want to be a sadist. I don't want to be gross. But like, part of the fun of horror movies is watching people die. And when you do the same deaths over and over again, you're taking a little bit of like the fun out of it. You know what I mean? Like think about if all of the characters in Nightmare on Elm Street died the exact same way, it wouldn't be as fun.
Yeah, but I think that's also coming from American horror conceptions, generally speaking, that when I for me, the uniqueness of a character death is not so much of a big deal in Eastern horror as it is as in Western.
In slashers.
Yeah. Just purely because of the dichotomy or the distinction between the two approaches to the genre. Whereas I think in Eastern horror, it's kind of the mood and the ambiance and the setting itself and like how you exist out in a place outside of your control or relation. Whereas in Western fiction and Western horror, the Western horror canon, it's the shape for the most part, the force of the shape. Like it's always like the uniqueness of the Michael Myers shaped character and switch that out for like Leatherface or Freddy Krueger or Jason or even Ghostface. It's all of them have the uniqueness of their kills because that's what the draw is.
Yeah, in slashers for sure.
Yeah.
But I even think that like just for visual variety, like so mostly what's happening is these people are being possessed and the possessing element, which turns out to be an evil demon, it's brought into this family and this world because people thought it was like a god they were worshiping, and they were allowed the god was like giving them sort of control over the world around them.
Yeah, a little bit more backstory. So in the flashback sequences, because the movie there's flashbacks integrated in with the present day, so it's like not like you have one block where it's all set in one time and then another block.
No, and there are actually kind of chapters, and each of the chapters is broken up by a little bit more of the flashbacks.
Yeah,
and so what you end up getting is that like in the first set of contemporary timeline before a flashback, you have kind of one conception of Ronan, and then you go back through the flashback, you see a little more setup of how they got in trouble and how they got themselves into this situation, and now you're having a little bit less like, oh, she's just like clearly a victim of these horrible circumstances, and you start like being more critical of what's
to elaborate essentially. So Ronan in the flashback went to this village with her gang of YouTuber friends, Dom, who's played by Sean Lin,
who's basically her boyfriend,
Yuan, who's played by RQ. I think he's credited as RQ. I don't know if he wants me to give out his government, but Wen Qing Yu, who plays Yuan, who is the cameraman essentially, and
who is the most antagonistic in so far as like pushing them to keep getting better footage and keep doing more.
He's like, he kind of represents, at least what I saw, as like the pervasiveness of like camera culture.
Yeah, definitely. No, he's like super voyeuristic for sure. He wants to keep seeing more. He wants to see like more of what they don't want to show us.
These villagers are being really, really nice and letting them crash there.
But they're also being cagey too.
Because also they're outsiders. Yeah. These are city folk coming into a rural town.
Well, I think it's a family, right? No, I think someone's related to them. One of them's related to them. I think Dom might be related
Dom is related to the older gentleman. Because that's Dom's grand uncle or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, look, listen,
they've heard about this.
It's cool if you're here. You know, we're not really cool. They're not very talkative people, stuff like that. But don't interrupt our ceremonies. Don't come into these specific areas.
Specifically, they were like, you can't bring. They tried to get her to leave. Ronan has to leave. They say Ronan has to leave, and they're like, you take the car and you leave. And oh boy, should she have? But they specifically say because she's an outsider, and they're like, no, it's his girlfriend, like, you know what I mean, and so she can stay. She's not a stranger.
I believe the reason why behind they wanted her to leave so badly was not just because she's an outsider, because Yuan's also an outsider. I think it's because she was pregnant, because that's also something that they mentioned.
How did they know?
I just think they just do. They just do. It's that old that folk wisdom, bro.
Oh, I will say that it's really interesting. So this is really interesting. So one time, my grandma grabbed my mom by the hands, and she was pregnant with my sisters, Madison and Christian, and she held my mom's hand, and she's like, Corey, you're pregnant. And my mom didn't even know yet.
Yeah.
And that kind of, so the older woman grabs her hands, and like they're like, it almost seems like they're like, I don't know, it's really interesting. I mean, like, they do a bunch of things. Like, the whole movie's very, like evil inverted kind of Buddhism kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there is so many karmic, like, disasters in this movie. Like they do so many bad things karmically. There's so much that is done wrong karmically from like a karmic sense. Like they're like intrusive,
Trespassing,
yeah, exactly.
Deception,
they're disrespecting people's like burial rights.
They falsely presented themselves or falsely represented themselves.
Yeah. They break a bunch of mirrors, which isn't good in any culture, I don't think. Yeah. But it's just like a karmic disaster.
Yeah, essentially it's like everything that would go wrong does go wrong for them because they just curse themselves.
Yeah,
that's really it. Is that the bottom line is they curse themselves.
They dig around. They want to make cool YouTube videos, and they get themselves like this horrible curse. And what it turns out is basically this family has possessed themselves with a demon that was like
their inverted Mother Buddha.
Yeah, it's an inverted kind of good fortune where it allows them like control of other people's bad fortunes, and somehow in the past they maybe used this to their own gain, but they've clearly lost like total control over this like demonic presence, and so they're trying to suppress it, and they're trying to like divert it. They're trying to like,
well, you do what you do in Asian folklore. You seal it in a cave.
Seal it in a cave.
It's surprising enough, like the theme of sealing things in a cave shows up a lot in East Asian shamanism and shamanistic cultures, like the Shinto shrines with like the whole like essentially like taped over boulder in front of a cave mouth. That's like that's how the Shintos deal with it. In Korea, is you created like a dirt mound at the mouth of a cave. And in I think in China and like Taiwan, it's like they built like stone walls essentially. But like the whole concept of sealing something in a cave is because a mountain itself was seen as something sacred. Like a mountain has existed on the earth for so long that there's something inherently purifying that could be found within the soil of a mountain.
Interesting.
So when you dig a cave into a mountain to seal something, it's meant to like actually seal it and like purify it, which makes sense because they're also in like a super rurally area. But I think it really just is. It feels like I feel like the American equivalent would be like wrong turn. Like the Appalachian redneck kind of horror tropey things, where it's like you have city folk coming to a rural community, and the rules are different. The people act a little strange or a little
like some Deliverance.
Like maybe.
What I thought was really interesting when we first were talking about this, where you were saying that like culturally speaking, you felt like there were certain elements of watching this movie that like made hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And I think that's interesting. I cannot connect with that.
So for me personally, and I'm not alone in this, especially like coming from the Korean community and being like second generation Korean or whatever. But so in places like China, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, where like Eastern folk religions have existed for literally thousands and thousands of years, for literal millennia, right, and passed down, so on and so forth. And generally speaking, with little interruption for the most part. There was like the big Buddhist invasion, I will say in quotes, because
well, and that's true, because I mean, like, whereas like within each of these countries, they might have like specific things that make them quite different. You know, like Shinto obviously is like just Japan, but Buddhism is like pervasive kind of everywhere. Like, there was a big movement of Buddhism out of India into all these other places.
So Buddhism is derived from Hinduism.
Yeah.
Hinduism is the major religion derived from India, specifically before the establishment of India and what was known as, I think, the cradle of life. That's where it's like earliest documentations of modern world religions and modern society and stuff like that comes from like that specific area and region of the world. So you have people in Hinduism, and you have Siddhartha Gautama, who is a Indian prince that takes the teachings that he learned in Hinduism, denounces his royalty, travels the world, and he becomes known as the first Buddha. And then he takes his teachings, and then it's taken across all over the Middle East and further
across the Silk Road to the Far East.
To the Far East. And in the Far East, his teachings could further evolve. And
they
further
developed their own styles too.
Yeah. So
right?
then
Like Zen Buddhism, right, is like its own style.
Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and then you have other religions burgeoning from it and other philosophies like Taoism and Confucianism. These being derived directly from philosophers, or what we refer to as the great sages. Confucius is I think Confucius is considered the great sage, and then Lao Tzu is the great teacher or something like that. And basically, just what happens over time is they're not expunged from practice or culture, more as integrated with each other.
Yeah.
So aspects of Buddhism bleed into the modern day life. Aspects of Confucianism just get integrated into how people just behave. Aspects of Taoism are just integrated into people's perceptions of manners and proper form and function within a society. Respect your elders, let your elders eat first, take your shoes off before you enter the house, stuff like that. It's essentially just integration into contemporary culture. Stuff like this is very, very common. I think the best example is with Japan and Shintoism, whereas every person in Japan doesn't really know about Shintoism, but at the same time,
they
is
know a lot
very
about
well
Shintoism.
aware about Shintoism, just because it's integrated into their culture.
Yeah, into like everyday aspects of life. Yeah, no, it's really interesting too, because I think a lot of people like in Japan maybe wouldn't be able to like tell you why taking your shoes off or like having a different set of clothes for outside the house
or why maintaining items is important or whatever.
Like, but just like it's part of the culture. Yeah, and all of those things do have like Shinto Buddhist kind of like cultural origins.
Yeah, and it's in some areas like in Japan, whereas like Buddhism and Shintoism were at odds for a long time until the religions were integrated with one another and to contemporary society, and then you have a resurgence of like the imperial religions and stuff like that. It's complicated, but basically the point is it's that these older religions just get mixed into the fold of regular societal behavior
and the way people think
and general accepted customs, right? So for me personally, whereas Korean shamanism, right, is integrated into just modern day how like Koreans behave, my family still does practices related to like Korean Buddhism and Korean Confucianism and Korean Taoism, but we don't necessarily explicitly recognize it as that. Like my family, like from a religious standpoint, for the most part, is either Catholic or Protestant. Just because, like, when they immigrated here, a lot of them converted, or they grew up in Korea.
Well, not that, but I mean, there is like
post-Korean War with the heavy amount of American GIs and the influence of the
Red Cross and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't actually know that, and I do think it is interesting that Christianity is pretty popular in Korea, especially
absolutely
amongst the Far East.
Yeah. Christianity has a super strong foothold in Korea,
especially compared to similarly geographical places.
Whereas, like, it's not the same as in Japan. Whereas Christianity was seen as a much more invasive force in Japan because I think it was also introduced much earlier.
Way earlier, yeah.
Or tried to be integrated much earlier, I should say.
I mean, they definitely never had like you'd think that because the end of World War II and the end of the Korean War is like not that far apart from one another, they would have had a similar kind of like impact, but they really didn't. I mean, China Christianity really took off in Korea, and I think it's a really interesting thing, but it didn't really happen in Japan.
And so even then, though, right, my personally, I would lean more agnostic, if not towards like Taoism or Confucianism, purely because of that's like from philosophical and personal philosophy. Regardless of that, just because I grew up like in a Korean household, culturally speaking, and we've done practices like memorial practices and stuff like that, where we put food out for our ancestors, and we have our photographs, and we burn incense and stuff like that, and we have like an altar set up and everything. That's not something that is explicitly like Buddhist or Taoist or Confucian or rooted in Confucianism, even though it is technically. It's not something that we explicitly recognize as that, right? But so it's very much just like an integration into who my cultural identity. So when I watch this film and I'm like seeing all this Buddhist stuff, there is just like that under like current like in under my skin where it's just like, hey man, maybe you're signing yourself up for something really, really bad here. Like, you know,
in this movie, we'll eventually get to it. It plays a pretty cruel trick on you.
It plays an insanely cruel trick on you. So the first time,
it's different for me though. You know what I mean? Because to me, it does feel like just a fun trick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think if here's the thing, if I was convinced that he was going to get one of the players in the Lions hurt, you know what I mean? Maybe I would. You know what I mean? Because like all of a sudden, my superstitions are getting triggered.
So,
you know?
Yeah, no, it immediately triggered the superstitious nature of myself and, you know, who I am, where I'm like, okay, maybe I just got kicked down the ladder or the cycle of reincarnation. I just got kicked down a couple rungs.
Yeah, watching this movie, I'm definitely coming back a caterpillar.
Yeah. Or I'm being born as a rock.
Yeah, for sure. And so you think we should just get into what the trick is?
So...
Because it's a pretty great trick, and I do think that there's a lot to talk about it.
I will preface it with the first time I watched this movie, I honestly just started repeating it myself mindlessly, just going like, oh, no, with like the movie and doing the chant, thinking it was fucking nothing.
Yeah, so there's a chant. The opening of the movie opens with a chant. There's this cool monologue about the superstitious nature of the human people, and then it starts teaching you a chant.
Oh my god! And then
it has you do it multiple times throughout the movie, and it asks you your name, and it does this whole thing. And at the end of the movie, you find out that Ronan has talked you, the viewer, into casting the curse on yourself,
which is
her strategy for saving the life of her little girl. It's so cool. It's a really cool, good trick. It's a really cool, good trick.
And then there's a symbol that shows up constantly throughout the film.
The movie's great at like branding itself in that way. Like all of these kind of evil Buddhist statues are really epic and beautiful looking.
They're these disfigured Buddha statues. These disfigured Mother Buddha statues, I think, in particular, because the deity that they are praying to.
But they have like some Asura kind of element where they have a bunch of arms and stuff like that.
It's because it's literally the inverted Mother Buddha.
Right.
It's a inhumane, demonic creature. One devoid of any potential of enlightenment or whatever. And it holds.
It's really interesting too because it deals with kind of like it's an inversion. You see these mirrors everywhere, and the mirrors, other than just being like a source for like us to wince when they get broken, kind of have this interesting way in which they remind us that the anti-Buddha, or like the evil Buddha mother, is kind of like this thing that like instead of bringing in good fortune, puts out
bad fortune,
really, really bad fortune.
Yeah,
which is. It's just a cool visual motif there.
Also, there's a lot of like trypophobia stuff.
Oh, with so much trypophobia. Like at one point in time, the little girl is like
covered in like sores
and like holes in her body, and like it's really nasty.
Insane. Like
really
honestly
nasty.
like the really body horror stuff in it was some of the scariest things.
I know, and they
when she opens her mouth and it's just fucking rows of teeth. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I like that part too. There's a lot of teeth stuff in the movie, and like to be fair, I feel like teeth stuff for some reason suited the vibe of this movie a little bit better.
A lot more than the rotting.
Some of the other stuff they were doing.
They're definitely better than the head bashing. I would have thought
head bashing sucks.
I thought it would have been so interesting if they took the teeth stuff to like the extreme, like the maximum was like it starts growing in their throat and they can't like breathe or whatever. Or like I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but. What little they did with that was super, super interesting and super, super cool.
It's creepy and gross.
But going back to like the whole rooted in Buddhism and stuff like that, it's all fictitious for one. It's not the chant's not real. Like the symbols aren't real. The inverted Mother Buddha is not a real thing. Like all of it is fictitious, but it's rooted in the real world religions of Buddhism and Hinduism.
Well, and it does have this really cool way of kind of taking what like making it like an un-Buddhism is a cool strategy.
Yeah.
And it gives you a lot to work with because then you can take kind of any basic idea about Buddhism, because like they use a lot of like they use like all this like cool Ayurvedic kind of language that like perfectly like builds out.
I think the appeal that you're talking about is the same appeal that people have with Jujutsu Kaisen right now.
Okay.
Because Jujutsu Kaisen is rooted in Buddhist mysticism. Like,
Okay.
the Jujutsu sorcerers and stuff like that, they tap into like suffering, and suffering is a big part of the Buddhist cycle.
Of course.
And stuff like that.
Yeah, of course.
So definitely, I think we're seeing a resurgence in that in fictional media and stuff like that, because these are just such one for a Western audience. They're foreign concepts.
They're new. Yeah, it's exciting. There's a novelty to it. That's for sure. And then for a domestic East Asian audience, it's something that you kind of already know a bunch about.
Right. Tertiary knowledge, something interesting.
Tertiary for sure.
Yeah. It's like like how obsessed the West is with like Greek mythology and stuff like that.
Rome, baby. I do enjoy the meme like this is my Rome.
This is my Roman Empire.
Yeah, my Roman Empire. Yeah, like somebody was talking about Daft Punk playing at Lollapalooza in 2006.
This is my Roman Empire.
Was a Roman Empire. The face that launched the EDM, a thousand EDM chips.
Is that the one where Phoenix brought them on? I can't remember.
I don't know, but it was one of their two last big American, because they did Alive 2007, but like it's pretty crazy. Like I don't know if people are interested in dance music or not, but like it was very not particularly popular in America, at least in like the early 2000s, and then EDM like was like this massive wave, and like of course Alive 2007 and like the big Daft Punk like 2006
I always saw
show
it
at
associated
Lollapalooza.
with like the underground industrial kind of scene almost. It was like EDM was never as mainstream as, I don't know,
electronic dance music. It was really big in the 90s. It was really, really big in the 90s. Like a huge portion of like the biggest 90s pop hits.
I guess I'm talking like 2000s.
In the early 2000s, like it had died, especially in America, but it lived on in Europe, especially like in Ibiza. But like Americans didn't like it. I remember like specifically like in high school, when I started high school, if you liked electronic music, people would be like, but like jam bands, but like Dave Matthews, but like Maroon 5, and stuff like that.
Jam bands.
Yeah. And then by the end of my high school, experience, like people really like Deadmau5 was like kind of like the biggest buzz artist of like me with like the year I graduated.
So it's funny because like when I entered high school, like dubstep had already been like a thing for several years, and essentially it was falling out of popularity at that point.
Yeah, like
even when I was
totally, because dubstep is like a core millennial cultural memory for sure.
I just remember entering,
whether you loved or hated Skrillex, that's like an essential cultural, like millennial cultural experience.
But I don't know. Maybe it's just like it comes in waves, because I feel like right now we're also kind of seeing a semi-resurgence of like electronic style music.
Yeah, but what also seems interesting right now is it seems like the young kids, like because they grew up in an environment where like dubstep it was like old news, they got really into like Gen Z really likes like house and techno, which is like 90s dance music. They like they're skipping over
something. Gen Z doesn't know this, but they like Vocaloids.
They
do. Gen Z listens to Vocaloid songs like constantly, and they just don't know it's a Vocaloid.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Who, like, is there an example?
Something Waltz. That's like a TikTok sound that was trending for a long time. Also in the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Okay, and people think it's like a person singing, but it's actually a Vocaloid.
Yeah, it's Hatsune Miku.
Oh, is it Miku?
It's literally Hatsune
It's always Miku, right?
And there's other Vocaloids. There's other Vocaloids. But
Saga is not sponsoring this video.
But the most popular is Hatsune Miku. But even like there's another popular TikTok song. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it essentially it uses a Vocaloid program.
Yeah, but I feel like here's the thing. Gen Z people are such weebs. I feel like they do know that they love Vocaloids.
They'll never admit it.
Maybe. I don't know. Like Gen Z's like definitely like, it's really funny. Like part of the reason why I vibe with you and like other Gen Z people as well as I do is because things that were like niche for my generation are pretty mainstream for you guys.
Here's the thing. Things that are mainstream for us were niche for me growing up. Like they're only mainstream. Like, do you know how many people that I know would like fucking make fun of me growing up because I was into reading manga and reading comic books and like watching anime?
Having
like,
interests when you're a kid is the worst thing that
not
can
just
happen
that,
to you.
like having an interest and keeping up with those interests like regularly. Like I would read news
Just caring.
articles and like
That's so sad, but when you're a kid, it's true that if you catch somebody caring about something, like, ha, you care, like, you know what I mean? That's the Bart Simpson thing to do, is like, oh, it's a person over there giving a shit. Like, what a fucking idiot. What a fucking moron. He cares. What a fucking loser. And then as you get older, it gets more acceptable to like have passions because people realize they don't even have them, and they start like realizing that because they don't have them, they don't have communities, they don't have friends, they don't have like stuff to talk about with people other than like maybe the same few core things that they were like allowed to like as a young person.
Right. It just feels like, while I was out there trying to form a personality, everyone else nowadays is just trying to hop on with that. I thought it was cool.
You're giving me the energy of the like, well, you were out fucking girls, I was studying the blade.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, all these
the blade,
fucking
bro.
Chads were out here
exactly.
talking up them Stacys.
Yeah.
I was in here labbing.
Yeah.
I was studying the blade. I was learning how to I was learning wave dashing. I was learning how to Korean backdash. I was
watching Serial Experiments Lane.
Hell fucking yeah. The fact that Duvet, which is by
the song rules.
Yeah. Which freaking
anime rules, by the way, I guess. Just in case you didn't know, we think anime fucking rules. Let's back to the movie. What the fuck were we talking about the movie? Twist is good. It's a good twist. Great twist. Yeah. I'm cursed now. Turns out I'm cursed.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who watches it,
anybody who watches it is cursed. I will say though, the more of us watch it, and this is kind of like a weird thing. Do you think people subconsciously show this movie to other people so that they'll be less worried about the curse? Because they know that the more people that see it, the weaker the curse is.
The weaker the curse is because it's diluted. Which,
that's a weird.
That's an interesting point.
That's the best guerrilla marketing campaign I've ever thought of.
Yeah.
Like, oh, everyone has to see this movie, or else the curse is gonna kill me.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Truth or Dare, but better.
Yeah.
Have you seen Truth or Dare?
No. It's Truth or Dare.
Truth or Dare was a horror movie released, I think, like in 2019.
Okay, but what was the guerrilla element of that one?
It's the same deal. Like they recorded a vlog and said Truth or Dare, and now you're part of the game. So you're all cursed.
Then you have to like share it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's it's a way cooler version of what you just said.
It's for me. This just feels like the regular evolution of chain mail and chain emails.
Yes.
Curse chain
but
mail.
it's like a full budget movie.
Yeah. Like, Smile Dog?
No, it's Smile Dog.
You should Google Smile Dog. I'm not going to put it in this video because fuck that.
Is this going to be Tub Girl? Is this going to be just another Tub Girl?
No, Smile Dog is just it's like 3 Polaroid JPEGs that would be sent via chain email to people. And if you saw Smile Dog, you had to send it to 10 people or else Smile Dog would show up in your house.
Is Smile Dog kind of scary?
It was like one of the oldest internet creepypastas.
Oh, okay.
Like one of the earliest ones.
Okay, I missed this one. I missed the creepypasta, guys. Oops.
Did you grow up during the creepypasta era?
Creepypastas were, yeah, definitely. No, I will say that creepypastas were probably at the height of their popularity when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, like I went to college in like 2007, 2008, and creepypastas by like 2009, 2010, creepypastas were like pretty.
I feel like
popular.
It was in full popularity like 2012 era.
I remember that we had them. Here's the thing: when I was in early high school, we had them because Green Text. There was lots of Green Text creepypastas.
Well, because like Green Text was the precursor to like modern creepypasta. I feel like,
but they weren't as ubiquitous as they were in
like Green Text itself now is almost like a meme in itself.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas like creepypasta,
but a lot of creepypastas were Green Text
back
in the day.
Were you more into the Green Text stuff, or did you also like dip into like SCP?
What's SCP?
Secure, Contain, Protect. It's like this whole. It started as Green Text threads, and then it turned into its own forum page where people submitted short stories for like.
Okay, no, I never.
Organization.
Here's the thing. I was never a part of Something Awful.
Uh huh.
I was never a part of. I was a part of YTMND, I did do YTMND and I did do 4chan and
Okay.
I did do like other things, but like there were things that I knew about and just didn't do, and then that one I never even heard of.
So I think SCP Foundation is definitely something of more of like my internet generation. I actually did submit some short stories for the SCP Foundation. None of them ever got published, but I did try and submit stuff because it was a cool writing experiment. Definitely like growing up and seeing that develop alongside me as was just like an interesting outlet, I guess, especially for like horror and the idea of most SCP stuff is kind of just monsters for the most part.
Okay.
Think like a Cabin in the Woods, and like you go to the government basement.
Yeah, I love Cabin in the Woods. That's a really good movie.
The entire government basement in Cabin in the Woods is essentially the SCP Foundation.
Okay.
And I think around 2013 there was a video game made by an indie game made by fans, and then that got played by like the big gaming YouTubers, like the reactionary horror YouTubers at the time, and then that's what like made it into much more of a popular kind of cultural touchstone or whatever.
Okay. There's so many really good creepypastas in green text though. I mean, some of them are so simple too. You know, like I remember there's this one where this guy goes hiking by himself in Portland, and he taps out halfway through. He like can't, there's this northwestern path up there like along the Canadian American border, and like halfway through he's like, this is too tough, I can't actually do it. He goes home and he develops all the photos that he took while he was there, and one of the photos is in his tent. There's a picture of him sleeping in his tent. And he never fucking camped again. That's such a good green text. Like I just get myself goosebumps saying it.
One of my favorites, I think it also started as a green text, was Ted the Caver. I think that's like one of the most famous creepypastas. I think it's sometimes credited as the first one. It's about this guy that loves caving. Like he goes to go into caves with his buddy, right? So they discover this one cave, and there's a hole in the floor, and it's covered up by a rock. So they decide to move the rock and stuff like that. And then like it just talks about how the air felt dead, and there was no wind or no breeze, and they're just doing this to explore a cave, but now they just feel compelled to keep going back to this one cave. And they had a line of rope going deep into the cave, past the rock and past the hole and stuff like that. But when they're at the mouth of the cave, they can hear something deeper in there scraping across the floor, like as if something had moved the rock back over the hole or moved the rock out of the hole so that it can come out. And then one of the last times they went, they saw the rope line start to like pull itself taut as it was getting pulled deeper into the cave. So as they were like climbing out and running out, they know something is coming up, so they just cut the line. And then the last entry is from Ted. He's going, I'm going back to the cave. That's kind of just it, because he just felt so compelled to go back to the cave, and that's the last entry. It's just a guy in a cave.
That one reminds me of, sometimes there's just certain things you don't really know why it's scary and you kind of really like it. Like Junji Ito has that one about the hole.
Oh, where it's like this was made for me. It's the mystery in something valley or something like that.
Where it's just a person who's compelled to be in this human-sized hole that like perfectly fits them in the wall of this.
An earthquake happens, and in this valley, like the mountain kind of splits in half.
Yeah,
and in the splitting, you see that on one side there's these perfectly carved human silhouettes for each person in the village. And every single one of them is compelled to just
get into their hole,
find their hole, and then like essentially
they kind of just like evaporate into the hole.
They get sucked in slowly.
Yeah.
Right. And what you eventually find out is they find the other side where the holes lead, because like there's another earthquake or something like that, and then these excavators are on the other side of the mountain, and they realize that these people, as they're getting sucked into the mountain through these holes, they're getting stretched out and twisted up.
Yeah, into like spaghetti.
Yeah, essentially these thin, grotesque, like humanoid, like
even just being sucked into the hole is something so weird about it.
Well, because like it even like the way it describes it is like
well, I'm just like looking at the visual of it. You know what I mean? There's something about it, like it's just fucking something. I don't know.
There's
but I remember Junji Ito and creepypasta are like.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, because like people would post them in like the same spiritual kind of threads on 4chan.
Yeah. So. Also, I feel like Junji Ito's, a lot of his work feels so inspired by like short form horror stories.
Yeah, totally.
Like campfire story type fiction.
Absolutely, totally.
Which is
it
like
was so funny because it perfectly like the '90s kids who read the scary stories for like to read Alone in the Dark are the exact kids who then 10, 15 years later were like reading Junji Ito.
Yeah,
it's like perfectly ready for them when they got there.
If anything, it's like all of it is just the evolution of campfire horror stories.
Yeah.
And
Getting spooked is fun.
Yeah. And Junji Ito is just really good at like the page turn. Like he's one of those mangaka where I would argue is like a master of the page turn.
Well, the cool thing was I can never remember their names because they were never as famous. But like those threads on 4chan back in the day would include like a bunch of other artists. Now, if you ask people about Japanese horror manga,
all they know is Junji Ito.
Exactly. But like on those threads back in the day, there'd be a bunch of different crazy. There'd be like weird, like such fucked up stuff. I remember seeing one where there was like scientists like experimenting on like little baby children with like maggots coming out of their butts, just like the weirdest, most
because a lot of the early horror mangas coming out of Japan that were like super popular were kind of just exploitative horror type stuff. Like they essentially almost exclusively is it Guro? Is that what it's called?
Oh, gore, yeah, Guro's gore,
yeah.
It's like sexual, it's in a sexual way,
Which is that was kind of
like and there were threads for that. There was like always threads for that kind of stuff. And people would go in just to freak themselves out and just get out. It's such a funny, interesting like thing that people love to scare themselves. I always thought that was interesting. Like, there's a lot of writers out there who write that stuff, and they know how to get themselves really freaked out, and that's what they write. They just write what freaks themselves out. Like they write until they're too freaked out, and then they have to stop.
Yeah. I mean, hey.
Yeah, I think Stephen King has like wrote a lot of like has talked a lot about that. I know Brady Easton Ellis talks a lot about that.
Right. I guess the only thing we are left to talk about is Incantation is loosely inspired by true events.
Yes. Oh yeah, I forgot.
I mean, we're on the topic of creepypastas and urban legends and stuff like that.
That's
anyways.
exactly what this is. So I've purposefully not read about this so that Ryan can tell me about it.
So the film is loosely, and I say loosely in the
broadest sense.
The broadest sense.
Yeah, because it's about like 6 people,
and
so this is only about like there's like 5 characters in this movie max, but it's really it's not it's
inspired by events written about in a newspaper in the Gushan district of Kaohsiung, Taiwan, in 2005, and it boils down to this one family that believed that they were all possessed by Chinese folk deities or East Asian folk deities, and it was a family of 6. And they are all possessed by various deities, but each of them thought that they were possessed by a deity, but believed the others were possessed by demons, which is kind of interesting, I think, for the start.
Well, just even like this weird line between deity and demon is really funny to begin with.
And their family was, according to reports by the neighbors and newspapers, incredibly super religious, like. Would do chants and dances and prayers at the oddest hours of the nights before they even declared their possession. The first one to be possessed, I believe, was the youngest daughter, who she said she was possessed by the 3 princes, which I think is meant to be reference to Netza, which is like the 3-headed prince in Chinese folklore.
Okay. There's a 300 prince in Chinese folklore?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
He fights a dragon, I think.
Oh, that was a cool guy then.
All right. And so she says that she's possessed by Netza and then tells her parents that, we need to bring the eldest sister back because, something bad's going to happen. So the elder sister just comes back to the family, and then all of a sudden the rest of the family members slowly, one by one, start to claim that they're possessed by different entities.
Okay.
The father claims to be possessed by the Jade Emperor, Wu Di, who is in Chinese folklore the progenitor god of everything.
Okay.
The mother believes she's possessed by the Queen Mother, who in Chinese folklore is the wife of the Jade Emperor. The second, the eldest daughter is possessed by the Avalokitesvara, Avalokitesvara, which is one of the bodhisattvas.
Yeah, it sounds like a Buddhist thing.
I think in Chinese mythology, the female form is Kuan Yin or Kuan Yin.
I was about to say not Guan Yu.
Yeah,
the god of war.
No, it's the the Bodhi of compassion.
Okay.
And the second daughter she believed she was possessed by the 7 fairies. The youngest son believed he was possessed by the acting master, and just generally speaking, they all believed the other person was just possessed by demons. So,
each one of them thought
they were possessed by the real one.
By the real one. And everyone else is by imitators.
Is by demons pretending to be the deity.
It's a really interesting level of
delusion.
Yeah, but like what's the word, like when you're like
hysteria?
Yeah, but like also like when you're superstitious of other people, when you're like
paranoia.
Yeah. It's an interesting
level. No, it's very
the paranoia part about it is what really gets me.
So
like the kind of looking at the other one, be like, they're fucked up. That one's crazy. That one, they've got demons in them.
So the youngest daughter started first the process of, I believe, self-flagellation and beating herself.
Oh, great. Like Catholic stuff. Cool.
For the sake of maintaining the, the possession or whatever, being able to, appease the deity that is possessing her. Eventually, the rest of them just start beating themselves. And then they start just a warning here. This is going to be really fucking gross. They start a diet of urine and feces.
Oh, okay. Wait. So they start... One of them starts beating themselves, and then all of them start eating pee and shit.
So one of them starts beating themselves, and the rest of them join in on beating themselves.
Okay.
So
they're like competing over like who can self-flagellate more.
Yeah. And then the entire family...
This sounds like some Black Plague behavior. Keep going.
The entire family goes on just fast.
Is this like a rural part of Taiwan?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it's like inland, but on the western coast.
Okay.
It's not like super rural. There's like they had neighbors, and they lived in like a relatively like large town. But even then, they were like still considered, I think, like
freaks.
Based on what I've
they were freaks before they started.
Yeah, they were like the odd people, odd family on the block. So for they start a diet of urine and feces. They pick up the chants.
What inspires that? Just one of them starts doing it, and the other one start imitating them.
I think
to
it's
prove that they're the real
dad
one?
that proposes it to purify themselves.
Okay, gross.
It's fucking disgusting.
Gross.
The chanting and the dancing and the bonfires or whatever, their shamanistic practices just increase a lot overnight. And the neighbors are like reporting it, and they're like made uncomfortable because they're being really loud and stuff like that. They report smells coming from their place, and then eventually the family gangs up on the eldest daughter. They just all agree that she's the one that's truly possessed by the demon, and they beat her throughout the entire night. Essentially,
do they kill her?
It's believed, some reports, that they beat her to death. Other reports claim that she died after they dropped her body off at the hospital, and they just leave her. They didn't drop her off at the hospital. Like, when I say they dropped her off, they literally just dropped her off. They took her to the hospital at night when no one else was around, left her body on the front doorstep, where it wasn't found until the next morning,
when she was already dead,
when the shift change occurred, and I believe she was already declared dead at that point. So they
basically beat her to death.
Yeah, and they were charged with death by abandonment, technically, under Chinese law, because they couldn't. I don't think they could solidly prove that she had died from their beating or died because of the injuries resulting from the beating and exposure. Okay. But regardless, it falls under the purview of negligence and abandonment. So if your direct inaction or action results in someone dying because you abandoned them or chose not to assist them in some way, shape, or form, because you have a direct ability to do so and responsibility to do so, because parents, siblings, stuff like that, you could be held responsible for their death.
Okay, so it was almost more like a manslaughter thing then.
Yeah. Okay. And I think they only got a maximum charge of like 5 years, or whatever,
for killing this.
Yeah. And they were also obsessed with salt. Like they would have an excessive use of salt circles and salt rubs, just salt, purifying salt.
A lot of people do think that salt is like this purification thing. Like yeah, for sure.
So when the investigators came into their house, the house was essentially in disarray, and they had used. It smelled like shit.
I mean,
and partially it's because they were using their own shit to smear writings on the walls and incantations on the walls.
Can you imagine going into that place?
So yeah, it was just straight fucked in this house. And subsequently, like, investigators have kind of explained it that it was a thing of mass hysteria.
Yeah.
They don't know the direct cause why this happened all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like it appears like one night they flip the switch.
Yeah, they get like really crazy.
Yeah.
I think they go from being weird to getting really crazy.
Because another thing is, immediately after the daughter was pronounced dead, and because the family had just dropped her off at the hospital, they actually genuinely thought that she was still alive when they dropped her off. Which is weird because, like, I think one of them was a nurse, so they should have a medical background, but whatever, it's details, right? Or getting lost in the details. When they found out on the news that their daughter had died, that kind of shocked them back into reality almost.
Really?
Yeah, from what I've understood.
Stop, like, acting is crazy. I will say it's pretty interesting because, like, so in the movie, there's a family that's like clearly been trying to use this evil entity for their own gains.
Yeah,
it seems like maybe even in the past it worked, but now they're just trying to contain it. They like put it in the hole, and they like try to, like, you know, and that's one of the things that I think actually is maybe like potentially like a weakness in the script, which is that they try to chase these people away when really, like, when we were instructed that the only way to, like, make this easier on anyone is to expose more people to the curse. So I'm not really sure. If anything, it would have been creepier and better if they were like, no, come in, you know what I mean?
Right.
But
just be super inviting.
Right, but that's not what they ended up doing. So I'm not really sure why that is that way. But anyways, and maybe because it's more karmically, them in being intrusive makes them earn it a little bit more, like the bad consequences.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
I'm not really sure. But anyways, so this family, though, that they kind of inherit the curse from, like Ronan inherits the curse from, does seem kind of, especially like the sequence, like there's the mass hysteria is kind of going on.
No, absolutely.
Like, so when Yuan, the cameraman, kind of like dies, it's one of the flashbacks. They've gone into the tunnel. It's like, you don't see the tunnel flash. You see the tunnel flashback very last, but it's kind of like the second to last flashback you see. And Yuan is like running around like in hysteria. She's trying to find him. Dom is like nowhere to be seen, and like the family is like clearly gone like fucking full berserk weird. And there's people with all these writing all over their bodies, and there's like an effigy that's being burned behind a house. It's like pretty apocalyptic.
It's very much like
there's another really good child actor in the movie too.
The one from the village, the one that had her ear cut off.
Yes,
so that way her flesh could be offered to the villagers for good fortune.
Yeah,
just like what the fuck.
that little girl was a really good actor too. She was really good.
Yeah,
the movie had two really good little girl actors.
I think an interesting fact that we haven't really touched upon is a theme aside from the fact that the curse spreads, or it's diluted based on its spreading. An interesting part that I think we have yet to really address is the fact that names have such a huge power over everything.
It's true, actually. So one of the big problems, and this is actually, I've been reading kind of YouTube comment kind of argument threads about the movie, just like seeing kind of like what people's kind of contemporary conversation about the movie is.
Right.
And one thing that they mentioned was about names, and how like having the demon know your real name or giving the demon your name is like a really important part of the process.
Right.
And that's why Ronan has us say our own names to the.
And then when Ming dies, he says his full name.
Yeah.
Because the demon is there in the room with him. So he just looks up, and then he just tells it his name. Which I thought that was really interesting, and I thought it was really cool that they don't really go into it all that much.
They don't really address it, not specifically. In fact, I saw more people talking about it specifically in the comment threads responding to the movie than actually in the movie.
But clearly, it's inherently super important.
Yes,
and
definitely.
I think we
What's really interesting
recognize.
Does it remind you of like, this is interesting? Like, there's like it's not the only thing that deals with this. Like, names are an important part of a lot of things. You know,
especially in like fiction and fantasy and like mysticism and shamanistic cultures and stuff like that. Like,
it shows up a bunch in Miyazaki.
Yes,
because it's a big part of Spirited Away, and it's a big part of Howl's Moving Castle.
Not just that, but because Miyazaki is adapting essentially British fantasy novels.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say so for Spirited Away, but yes.
So, if you're familiar with the Tales of Earthsea, because that's the Ursula Le Guin adaptation, I believe Miyazaki actually did want to adapt.
He did, but he never got to. There was a bunch of movies that he wanted to do, he didn't end up getting to do.
So in Ursula Le Guin's fiction, true names are essentially how wizards are able to maintain their power. And the truest bond people can share with each other is by giving them their true names. Because then you can have power over someone.
But that's how Howl maintains his power too, is by having all these fake names, having all these fake identities.
Right.
It's like how he maintains his independence and autonomy.
No one knows his true name. Just it it shows up everywhere. Like even in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, the Saruman and Gandalf and those
Aragorn too, right? Because Aragorn lives under a false name when he's while he's avoiding the responsibility of being king.
Yeah, but I guess in terms of like Saruman and Gandalf are limited by them being given new names.
Oh, that's true.
Because they're part of something known as like the Maiar.
Yeah.
Or maybe like one degree lower than the Maiar, which essentially are like demigods. But in order for them to walk around with the regular people, they had to be put into like flesh prisons, bodies. But in doing so, they were given new names, Saruman and Gandalf, which is not their true name. If they were to speak their true name, they would derive greater power from Edu Iluvatar, the great god of Middle Earth. But I think inherently we as an audience recognize the importance of a true name and stuff like that. So the film doesn't necessarily feel it's important to explain that as part of the curse. We just get that that's important.
Yeah, we kind of get it. Yeah. I did think that some people online had some really crazy theories, though. There was an early theory that I was reading in the comments that got a lot of responses, where people were suggesting that Ronan actually had initially attempted to get her daughter back, actually as a way to push the curse off onto someone else. She wasn't actually interested in being a mother. She just wanted to find a way to get rid of the curse. And then through being with her daughter, she realizes how much she loves her and cares about her, and realizes how fucked up that is.
While I think that's interesting,
I think it's a wild speculation, and I don't actually agree with it.
It's incredibly speculative.
Yeah.
And from what were presented in the film, I didn't get that reading. If anything,
I will say so here's the thing. It's the justification for it being found footage is that she's filming
all of this,
getting her daughter back.
Yeah. She's filming this vlog series essentially to make Dodo more comfortable or try to give her a better sense of who she is.
It seemed to be that the justification was actually just sentimentality. She said, when you get older, we'll watch this and we'll remember when you got to come back to live with me. It's like entirely sentimental. It's like purely sentimental. And that in itself, the expectation of sentimentality, does not suggest to the audience that this woman doesn't actually care about her daughter or never cared about her daughter. Right.
If anything, I feel like Ronan is acting out of regret for like everything that happened in that village. Because she gave up the child. She was declared as a crazy woman. Her friends are dead, stuff like that. And now the baby's cursed. It feels as though she's trying to fight fate and trying to deal with the regret that she's living with.
Well, and at first it almost seems like she really thought maybe I really was just crazy. Maybe everything I saw was just me being crazy.
Right.
And like everything's gonna be fine now because I'm not afraid anymore.
But
and
then,
she like tries really hard to have these like mantras, these like positive affirmation mantras, and like she tries to like spread like positivity to her daughter. She tries to teach her like positive like emotional coping mechanisms and like ways to think about life that like make you stronger. This is honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is actually a really fucking sad movie.
No, it is.
Like,
if you
it's not scary, but it's really
I
fucking
think you
sad.
can honestly look at it as as like a metaphor or an allegory for like a mom with incredibly deep mental health issues.
Yeah, and like baggage.
Yeah.
And like trying to give something positive
to her daughter.
Yeah,
And
it's really dark.
It's just incredibly difficult for her to do so.
Yeah, and she basically can't.
Yeah.
I mean, like there's like a weird.
There's
definitely a way in which you could literally read this as a metaphor for like a suicidal woman, like trying to raise a daughter. It's like really. I mean, there's a really sad, dark thing in it.
And I think like that really hammers in the end of the film too, because she's just so willing to kill herself for her daughter's sake. It's
the best part about it though is that she doesn't just think like, oh well, if I kill myself. No, she thinks if I kill myself and I curse all of you, she'll be okay. And I fucking love that.
Yeah,
I love it so
and
much. And
based on the footage, like the last scenes we see of Dodo,
she seems pretty okay.
She seems pretty okay.
Yeah. So
maybe spread.
I'll take a little bit of curse for you, Dodo. I'll take a teensy tiny little bit of curse just for you.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't want to be cursed. I don't like that idea.
You don't like being cursed?
No, I don't like the idea of being
All right,
cursed.
this just in, guys. Ryan does not like curses. Maybe you're just superstitious, Ryan.
Yeah, probably. I mean, actually, this is an interesting point I've been meaning to ask. Are you a skeptic or like superstitious? Where do you fall on the spectrum?
Definitely have superstitions. Like, here's the thing. Like, I am pretty OCD. I definitely have like a bunch of OCD kind of. This is not me speculating. This is like I for sure have OCD. And I think part of what OCD is it's like kind of a kind of like subconscious kind of superstition. It's like a kind of superstition that you operate under. And I definitely I have superstitious like aspects of my way that I think and the way that I gather information and the way that I act, but I definitely don't I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything. So it's weird that I have these instinctual kind of superstitions without having any, I don't have any dogmatic kind of beliefs about really about the supernatural or the natural order of the universe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I am a perpetual skeptic.
Yeah, you are. That's true. But I think that's why it's so funny for you to tell me, I don't know if I can watch this movie again. Last time I got cursed.
Technically speaking, yeah.
That's what I mean. But not technically speaking if you don't believe in curses.
I mean, I guess that's true, but,
If you don't believe in curses, it doesn't matter how many times you watch a movie.
I would rather not take the chances.
Bro, you're cursed. Here's the thing, though. I love it, too. It's really funny. I have these funny stories of, people who are, very cold, rational people. And, the moment in their life where they're, where they believed, the crazy thing. And I enjoy that. And, if a movie can, give you enough reason to, for a second, to, unthink all of the things that you think.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I can be as rational and as calculated as I want. But at the same time, I am a tried and true, through the core, a skeptic. But I am still open to the possibility or potential for evidence to exist that would,
change your mind.
Change my mind.
Sure. I actually think that you can be a skeptic and still really enjoy supernatural style horror.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really, really liked Talk to Me. Have you seen Talk to Me?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, we'll maybe save it because I think it's a pretty decent one to to save.
That was directed by those two YouTubers, right?
It's Australian.
I don't know. I think it was directed by YouTubers.
Really? I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. I don't know that much about the creators of the movie. I just saw it in theaters a couple weeks ago, and it's very much a spiritual kind of supernatural kind of horror movie, and it's really fun. So I really I'm on like a supernatural kick lately, actually.
Like
to be fair, like my favorite genre in horror is the slasher, which is kind of like the least supernatural. Obviously, it has a lot of supernatural kind of like nightmare logic that kind of operates within it, but it doesn't operate under the same kind of.
At most, I would give it like the post-natural kind of like tagline. It's not super, but it's not clearly not baseline. It's like somewhere in between.
Some of them are supernatural.
Yeah, some of them, like Freddy Krueger.
Freddy's obviously supernatural.
Jason Voorhees is also another supernatural one.
But he gets more supernatural
as they go on, right? Yeah.
Like Michael Myers and like they always start like Scream, right?
Yeah.
Like, Scream's not really supernatural.
Oh yeah, well the Ghostface killer in every Scream movie is always just a random person.
But they do start getting new weird powers where they can like it's not, it's hard to call it a power, but then like
no one in Scream gets a power.
I think summoning a bulletproof vest at any moment that you need it is a power. Infinite bulletproof vest summoning is a fucking power.
No, they just have a very corrupt police force.
Don't say that about Dewey.
What do you mean?
Dewey's a good guy.
For a long time, people thought that he was the actual Ghostface.
Of course.
But
they've thought that about every character because even the people that make Scream don't know who the real Ghostface is until they get to the next one. And then they figure it out they figure it out in the third act. They're like, it was. I love those movies. The movies are so fun. Anyways, I think we that about pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I'm tapped out.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for watching. For anyone still sticking around, there's a moth I think flying around somewhere,
and mosquitoes.
Oh my god, so fucking annoying. But
that's the real curse. The real curse was the mosquitoes we found along the way.
Thanks again for watching and sticking around for this long. We'll catch you in the next one. I think this is our last one for Halloween or the month of October. So
we'll definitely do more horror movies.
We'll do more horror movies, but this is our last in like our little marathon of horror. We'll maybe take a little break into a different genre. But other than that, thank you again for watching, and we'll hope to see you again. Bye bye.